Good day everyone, Warsimmer here, and today we're going to be taking a look at indirect artillery fire in Graviteam Mius. Now what I mean by indirect artillery fire is any field piece that is actually physically in the game during your tactical battles. So I'm not talking about off-map artillery, I'm talking about things that are physically present on the map while you're fighting. That's mortars and some smaller caliber artillery field guns. Now, the best way to do this is approach it from the campaign map, because this gives you a real-world application of how to effectively utilize these guns. I know a lot of people are confused by how to actually do it, and really I think a lot of that is just due to how obtuse the UI is, because it's not that complex. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. First, I'm going to hover my mouse over this battle group, and each battle group on this campaign map acts as one cohesive unit. They're part of the same order of battle. So if I click my middle mouse button on this battle group, it'll take me to that unit on the battle group screen. You can see it highlighted right here. Now, within this battle group, you can see we do have a mortar platoon, and if I put my mouse over it, you see specifically that we have two 8cm mortars. Now, whenever you're dealing with these mortars on the map, or any artillery piece that's actually on the map, there's two ways for them to engage with the enemy. The first one is through direct line of sight, which if they do have line of sight on the enemy, they are going to fire on that enemy if they're capable of doing so. But that's not ideal, right? Because what's going to happen if they have line of sight to the enemy is going to also have line of sight on them, and it exposes these units to fire. We don't want that. We want our artillery pieces to remain indirect, out of the line of fire. And ideally what we want is for them to have their firing solutions provided to them via forward advance spotters. Now the way that's done in Graviteam Mius is through their commanding units, right? So if you look at this section right here, you see in the number 1 spot, that commander of the firing platoon, that is the gentleman that can actually spot for these two mortars and give coordinates for them to rain down fire, okay? And the way he does that is that commander will communicate from his spot ahead on the front to the commander in the back in the 3rd place position, who has direct control of those two mortars. Now, the only way this is possible, if they're more than 100 meters apart and outside of shouting range, is to bridge the communication gap with the telephone and cable squad. So if that number 2 position squad wasn't there, that telephone and cable squad was axed, there's no way for that first commander to communicate to that 3rd commander if he spots a target, and he might as well not even exist because there's no way to relay that information. Graviteam is a simulator, it acts very realistically in unit behavior. Now, because we do have a telephone and cable squad, that's great, I'm going to show you how this works, but first I want to say one other thing. You can also have the company commander within this battle group, this gentleman right here, he can also act as a spotter so long as it goes through the chain of command. So what would happen in game is this company commander would spot an enemy unit, and then he would relay the orders to this number 1 guy, the commander of the firing platoon, and then that commander of the firing platoon would relay those orders to the guy in the 3rd spot, the commander of the heavy weapons squad, and he would directly just shout to those mortars, those 8cm mortars, what the coordinates were. So it is a little bit of a game of telephone, but it can end up being very effective if you know how to utilize it properly. However, if you look at this commander, you'll notice he has no telephone crew with him, so there's no way to establish a connection. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click him, and I'm going to replace that commanding unit with another commanding unit that does have a telephone crew, such as this gentleman right here. I don't know why it scrolled me down right there, so let's go back to the battle group. But you can see now we've replaced him with a squad that does have a telephone and cable group, and this group will connect this guy to all of his subordinate units, okay? That's what telephone and cable groups do. They only connect, very important, please pay attention. Telephone squads only connect units within their own platoon and 1 subordinate unit down. So since we're looking at this mortar platoon right here, it's a base level platoon. There's no subordinate unit under him. So this telephone squad is only going to make a connection between that commander of the firing platoon and the commander of the heavy weapons squad. This commander right here, his telephone and cable crew, will make a connection within his own personal platoon, and also 1 subordinate unit down, which are all of these platoons here. So this cable squad, once we get in game, is going to make a connection here, 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 and here. Okay? Very important to remember. Now let's go ahead and see how this works in real-world applications. I'm just going to go ahead and start an engagement. Not really that concerned with the logistics of it. Don't care about winning and losing. I just want to show you how this works. Okay, here we are on the map. And you can see all these units in this engagement. That's going to happen all the time during your campaigns. It can get confusing. Fortunately, it's color-coded, right? So we know this is all part of one battle group. You can see that mortar group here. Here's the commander of that battle group that we set up with his own telephone and cable squad. So I'm going to right-click here to see where he's at. You can see right here highlighted in green. And all I'm going to do right now is I'm going to turn this off. This is command hierarchy. I'm going to show you something cool in just a second. I'm going to show you how in the deployment phase, it shows the actual order of battle. So whenever you're laying out these troops, you're going to know before you start the engagement what the true order of battle is. So I'm going to place him here. And you can see right here, here's his telephone crew. Be sure to place your telephone crew right next to their commanding unit because they always start making connections starting with the commander, right? So whenever this telephone crew makes connections, he starts here, then the telephone crew will fan out and make connections to the subordinate units. So there's him, and then right now I'm just going to worry about the mortar squad. I'll place the commander of the mortar platoon right here, and then I'll put his telephone crew right here. Again, telephone crew next to the commander, and then I'll place this commander right here and his two mortars. You always place the mortars right next to this commander in the chain, okay, because he's going to directly shout orders. Now, if you go here and you select command hierarchy, it shows you, and this again is only during deployment, it shows you the on-paper order of battle. So you can see if we go to our commanding unit right here, you see this arrow going to this commanding unit because he's beneath him in the chain of command. This is the commander of our mortar platoon, and then he can relay orders. You see his order of battle. It's going down to the commander of the battery of these two 8-centimeter mortars. And he's going to shout the orders directly to them. You'll see his little red arrow, look, right there, going there and there. So that's how the chain of command works. Now, what's really cool is once you actually start the engagement, it shows the real chain of command as far as what orders can be relayed. And because these guys have a great distance between them, he can no longer shout to these guys, right? Because we're talking about a distance of, this is almost 200 meters. You can't really effectively, by vocals alone, communicate coordinates from that far out. So what you have to do is you have to set up your telephone communications. And if you notice here, when you first start out, telephone communications aren't there. And you see, look, this chain of command that we just saw in pre-deployment, it's gone, right? So there's really no way for these guys to communicate with each other. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start a pre-scripted battle that I've created to really effectively show you how indirect fire works and how we can set up these chains of command. So just bear with me. Okay, so we're within the engagement that I created. And I want you to imagine that this group of units is representative of the battle group that we created on the campaign map just a second ago, all right? So this would be the battle group commander, and here is his corresponding subordinate platoons. Now, I do know that I told you they were color-coded once you got into the tactical mode, and normally they are, but this is just a weird wonky feature of the battle editor where he's going to look blue and the rest are going to look red. Just ignore it. These are all part of the same battle group, with him being the commanding unit. So the first thing I would like to do whenever I set up an engagement like this is I go to the tactical map because it gives you a good overview of what's going on. So for instance, you can tell right here, Soviets are going to be attacking from the northwest, coming down through here and attacking right here. And if we go to this button right here and make sure our key points is unselected, and then we go to the display briefing button and unselect that as well, it gives you a really nice elevation map. It gives you a good idea of the topography of what the field is like. So we can see right here at 164, that looks like a really high point, right? And because in this example, we're going to be using the company commander as the spotter, we'll go ahead and place him. Let's place him here so we can see in between the tree lines. And if we press this button right here to see his area of sight, you can see it's not too good, right? So let's just maneuver him a little bit. And let's put him, let's see. I think right here would be very, very good, okay? Because you can see each one of these little squares is 250 meters. So that has a visibility range of well over 1 kilometer. And we know the enemy's attacking from this point. So he's going to be able to spot targets from a very far off distance and help with this infantry as they engage the advancing enemy. Now that we have our company commander set up, we want to go ahead and take his telephone and cable squad. Remember, we placed them right next to the commander. So we'll place them right here because that's where they begin their connections. And once we start the engagement, this telephone squad's going to connect to his subordinate units, right? He's going to connect to the mortar company commander, or the mortar platoon commander, excuse me, and these two infantry platoon commanders so they can be in direct communication. The next thing I want to do is take my mortar platoon. I can double click and select them all. And remember, it is this commander in the first position, the battery commander. he is the gentleman that is actually going to relay his orders to his subordinate commanders, right? So this commander right here is going to be in charge of these two mortar squads. This commander right here in charge of these two, and this one in charge of these two, and so forth. So we want to make sure they're within shouting range of each other. So I'm going to place this commander here and his two mortar units next to him. And you can see, based on the elevation map, it looks like they're going to be behind this hill. We'll check it out in a second. And finally, again, always place your cable squad right with the commander. And I'm just going to place this commander and this cable squad into the woods. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I want to show you the chain of command. So what's going to happen is this telephone squad is going to connect to this commander. This telephone squad is going to connect to this commander's subordinate commanders, right? So basically what I'm doing is I'm showing you that game of telephone, how far up the chain of command you can go. We're going down through two different layers of it. Now, normally this is kind of ineffective. It's not really tactically sound. What you want to do in the normal engagement is just have this unit up here spotting for you. Don't even worry about the company commander. Don't risk them. I'm just giving you the options available to you. So we'll just place him right there. Let's go ahead and go to the map. Scroll down, and you can see right here, look at these mortar units. They are well beneath the crest of the hill. They're not exposed to enemy fire, but we're going to have this gentleman, Mr. Peschke, spot for us once the cable crew makes those connections. One other thing I want to do before I begin this deployment is you want to actually select these artillery pieces themselves. In this case, our 8cm mortars, so not necessarily artillery. And you want to press this Show Indirect Fire Capabilities. And what this does is it shows the actual location points on the map they can hit. And look at that range. It's tremendous. Over 1 kilometer before it reds out, and they can hit everything. And that's because they're mortars, okay? So let's say you were using an artillery piece, a field gun. That's not necessarily going to work from this position because they might end up firing right into the top of this hill right here and not be able to hit targets beyond that. So always check this indirect fire button whenever you're preparing your deployment, because if you put a big heavy artillery piece right here behind the hill and it's combat ineffective because it can't shoot through the hill, you're screwed, right? So just remember that. But let's go ahead and get this engagement started, and I'll show you how it works. Oh, and one last thing. I just wanted to show you really quick. Let's go to the command hierarchy, and remember it shows you on paper the actual chain of command. Here's Peschke at the top. You see his green arrow going to Hartmann, the commander of the mortar platoon, and you see Hartmann's command arrows going to his subordinate units who are in direct control of these mortar pieces, right? And then once the engagement begins, we'll go ahead and start it. Once this engagement begins, we'll finish our initial orders. You'll see that these arrows are going to dissipate. They're going to disappear. And that's because, look, see, there they go. That's because there's no chain of communication. There's no way for them to communicate. Again, let's see how far apart they are. We're talking 300 meters. So we've got to let that wire crew make a connection. Now, I do want to forewarn you, don't get scared if you try this on your own and the cable crews don't immediately start running. They're going to make these connections automatically, but you have to give it about a minute or two. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up time and show you when they start. Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes and you see the cable crew is starting to move, right? So let's go ahead and put our speed back on normal. And again, what this cable crew is going to do, because these are his subordinate units, remember, cable crews only connect within their own platoon, so it would be they would connect within this platoon, but there's no units to connect to, and they're one subordinate unit down. So directly beneath this gentleman are these 3 platoons. So these cable crews are going to connect to the commander right here of the mortar platoon, the commander of the infantry platoon, and the commander of this infantry platoon, okay? And we're going to see that play out in real time. And you can actually see right here, here they go to connect. And if we come down to the mortar platoon commander, select his cable crew, you see they're going to fan out, disperse, and they're physically laying wires right now from him to him. And then we're going to see in a second that command hierarchy line, those arrows come back as soon as they make that connection. And I'm going to go ahead and pause it really quick because there's something important I need to tell you. So if you click on one of these mortar units, you'll see there's a few commands down here that you need to be aware of. This is the fire at will button, and that has nothing to do with commanders relaying spotting orders to them, okay? This just has to do with direct line of sight. So if this mortar squad had a direct line of sight to the enemy, this means they'd fire on them. I always leave that on. The essential button you need to pay attention to for mortars is this one right here, the fire control, or I like to call it the gearhead button. When this is on, this means that they will receive orders from their commanding unit. So whenever this guy up here spots for them, that means they're going to go ahead and fire mortars whenever he gives the command. It's done automatically. So you want to leave this on unless you want to conserve ammunition. You don't want to reveal positions, something like that. You're laying an ambush. Normally this is on because it allows them to initiate that automatic fire. The other button you want to be aware of is the act with caution button. It's the hidden command. And what this means for mortar units is it means they'll fire smoke. So let's say I had this selected, they'd fire a smoke round rather than a high explosive round. You can see our wire crew's getting close. Looks like he already has a connection. And that is this gentleman. You can see his phone is blue. That's another way to see if you actually have a connection. So if we click on this unit right now, this commander, you can actually see his phone is red because the wire crew hasn't reached him yet. So he does not have an active line connection with his commander. He couldn't receive orders. But we'll see them link up right here. We'll see it turn blue. See that phone unit? Got it above his head, turned blue right now. So he's connected. The hierarchy chain resumes. I'm going to go ahead and use the control button to select all of these mortars. So I'm holding on the control button and you'll see it's letting me select multiple units. And then I'm going to hold control 1. And then anytime I press the 1 key, it selects all of my mortars. And so that way, if I need to make them do any orders in tangent with one another, I can do it easily. One other thing that's wise to do is select your spotter and make sure that they are actually hidden so they don't reveal themselves. And I'm going to right click this fire at will button. I don't want them to expose themselves. Now see how their unit card is flashing here on the screen? That means they're going to stay hidden. The blinking means they're not going to fire at will because their job is spotting. It's not to participate in the engagement. The infantry is going to take care of that. And one final important note as we watch our cable guys run to their commander is that we want to look at this button right here with our cable crew. This is the AI control button. And it's going to be on by default. And all that means is that the cable crew is going to automatically make those connections when they have the possibility to do so. Normally, you never have to worry about this button, but I just want you to be aware of it because there may be some cases, and again, they're rare cases, but there may be some cases where, let's say, them running a cable automatically will expose them and you're trying to keep them hidden for whatever reason. You don't want them to be seen by the enemy. Turn this off and they're not going to make that movement to make that connection. Okay, and we see now the first enemy troops on the horizon. That black flare for the Wehrmacht indicates that the enemy has been spotted. We can click on our commanding unit, and you see how this shade of yellow is a little lighter than this one? It means that he spotted him. And you see this little blue icon above his head? That means he's communicating to his subordinate units. You can see the telephone right here. So he's relaying that he spotted the enemy right here. Now, I'm not entirely sure if he's going to go ahead and call in the mortar fire yet. That's left up to the AI's discretion. They do it at times. It just depends. Communicating to his subordinate unit, the platoon commander of the mortars, and you'll see that information come down, funnel down through here. See that? Receiving phone calls. Now, the mortars have began firing. We just saw him fire. Again, they can't see anything. It's all done through that game of telephone. So we have this company commander relaying orders to our platoon commander of the mortars, who's in turn relaying the orders down to the commanders of the individual mortar pieces, the 8cm mortars. And you can see them firing. Now, one thing that is really interesting is, let's say we click on one of these. Let's go to the mortar platoon. You can click this button right here, and that tells you what they're firing at the time. So you see right here, this green arrow. So we know this mortar is firing at these units. This mortar is firing at these units. And again, if I wanted to hit my 1 key to select all my mortars, I could just turn off this gearhead and they would no longer follow the commands to fire on these units. Okay, so now I want to give you a more practical application of when you would want to use your company commander to spot for you. A lot of times you'll run into situations where you go to your mortar platoon and you actually see, look down here, there's no telephone and cable crew. So you think, oh no, this commander can't be put into a forward position to observe and then relay down the fire commands because there's no way to have that cable crew establish a link to have a connection for them to communicate. What you can do is you can get a company commander, such as this gentleman right here, who does have the cable crew, and he can relay orders down to your platoon commander of your mortars, and so long as you place him within shouting distance, i.e. very close, of his other subordinate commanders, he can then relay vocally the coordinates. So it's a way of bypassing the system whenever you're in the middle of a campaign, and let's say this awesome mortar platoon you have doesn't have a cable crew with it, right? You can use that company commander as a surrogate, and he can just wire his phone crew down to the commander of that mortar platoon right here, and he can shout his orders directly to them in that manner. So we're going to see what happens when the enemy approaches. Okay, so the engagement has started. We have a nice field of view of all the enemy units. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the 1 key. Remember, I hotkeyed those to all the 8cm mortars, and you see the gearhead is unchecked, so they're not firing. I'm going to go ahead and select that gearhead, and they'll start firing because this company commander up here is going to relay those orders down to the platoon commander of the mortars. And even though he doesn't have a cable crew, even though he can't make actual line connections with his own subordinate commanders, he's within shouting range of all of them, so he's just yelling out the orders. Our own troops nicely laying down smoke, and we've effectively suppressed the Soviets. Okay, so one last thing I want to go over is something called player-controlled observed fire, which is a mechanism for you to more directly control the placement of your field artillery or mortar units when they're firing upon the enemy. So I have the game paused right now, and as you can see in this situation, there's no company commander. All we have are the individual platoons. That's okay, however, because if you look at our commander in this platoon unit right here, you'll see at the very end, we did have a telephone and cable squad, and if you look at the connections with his subordinate units, they've already went ahead and established the connection. So this commander up here, this platoon commander of the mortar platoon, is going to be able to relay his commands effectively to target these troops. Now, what I could do if I hit the 1 key and go to my mortars themselves, you'll see the gearhead isn't checked. I could go ahead and check that gearhead, and because this guy has a clear field of view of the enemy, they'd start firing automatically as he relayed his commands. But you also have the option to manually dictate the targets. That's what player-controlled observed fire is. And I'm going to show you a little bit of flexibility where you can get a bit more tactical in your engagements and hopefully have a better outcome to your engagements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first click on this commander, and right here is the player-controlled observed fire button. So I'm going to press that. But what I want to do first is go to my mortars, and I'm going to turn on this act with caution button. And if you remember, that's what allows them to lay smoke. And I'm going to lay a smoke screen and then move on to bombarding this section up here. So that will conceal our troops while they're getting hit with the mortars. So now that we have our act with caution button on for our mortars, I'm going to select the platoon commander, press this player controlled observed fire button, and I'm going to right click and drag, just like this. And you'll see this bar fill up. And that's where he wants the mortars to fire. I'm going to hit play, and you'll see this bar start to fill up. He has clear line of sight to it, so it's going to fill up as he writes down the coordinates of this position. Again, hitting the 1 key, you'll see this gearhead is unchecked. They're not going to actually follow the orders for this observed fire until you check the gearhead. I'm just going to let it go ahead and fill up a little bit first. Okay, so the way this works is once it gets to 25%, that's when your mortars would begin firing if the gearhead was checked. It's not checked, so it stops right at 25%. And as the commander of the platoon sees these mortar rounds hit, he can adjust and the accuracy will increase up to 100%. I'll go ahead and show you that now. I'll hit that 1 key. We'll press the gearhead. You see they have their designation. They're going to start firing. There they go. And these will be smoke rounds. And watch as these rounds hit, it's going to become more accurate because he's going to be able to relay back to his mortars how they need to reposition their fire. Oh! Ooh, don't want to light up our guys there. A little too close. Don't put it that close. You see now it's at 100%, so it's going to be much more accurate. And we'll just let them go ahead and waste all of their smoke rounds. They don't have a lot. You can hover your mouse right here. Whoops, let's go to our mortars. You can hover the mouse right here. And you see already they have 87 HE rounds left. They've already used all their smoke. So there's all the smoke right there, screening our troops. And now what I'm going to do is go back to our commander. And I'm going to go ahead and lay out a line. Well, first let's go to our mortars. Make sure they're actually going to fire HE rounds. Go to him, click here, and we'll drag a path right here. Again, we'll go to 25. They'll start firing. Or they're already firing. They might start firing at 20%. I'm not sure. I thought it was 25. But they will start firing. And then once this platoon commander sees where the rounds are hitting, it's going to be difficult for him to see, so it may not go up much because that smoke is probably blocking his view. Yeah, it's blocking his view. But you'll see these rounds start to hit up here. There they go. And you see them hitting. And even at 21%, I mean, if you have a large mass of troops in that general area, you're going to be targeting them. And you're going to be making hits. Remember, high explosive rounds were the leading cause of death in World War II. And that still holds true today. Have our infantry opening up now. And see, this is actually a good example of why that bar isn't filling up, is because that smoke was covering his observation of where the rounds were hitting. But now, you'll see the smoke dissipate, and this will actually climb up. I'm just going to go ahead and click and drag again. Get a new position. And now as he has seen rounds hit, he's able to fine-tune that positioning, and eventually the mortar rounds are only going to fall right within this bar that you dragged out. And now you see it jump to 100, so it's going to be extremely accurate placement. And we can get a visual representation of that as well. You'll see it's pretty much all of these 8cm rounds are falling just within this bar. Now, one thing I do want you to be aware of that's very important whenever you want to reposition your shots, because that commander already has coordinates wrapped down, locked down for this position right here. Do not right-click here if you want to reposition. Don't cancel it and then redo it because it starts over. If you simply left-click and then click a position that's close in proximity to his original coordinates, it's actually going to be extremely accurate from the get-go. So like, let's say I want to right-click and drag right here. Look at that. It starts at 100% from the get-go, right? So it's not like he has to refine and recalculate his coordinates because it was in such close proximity. Just be sure to left-click and then right-click again for your new positioning, and it will be extremely accurate so long as it's within the same general area. Not much these guys can do except put their heads down. Oh, brutal. And then one other option you have, I'm going to left-click again here. Let's focus on this area. You can just right-click once, and it will just set up a general area to fire upon. Running out of rounds, just 33 left. But you can see how much damage and how quickly you can inflict that damage using indirect fire to its full capabilities. Now, one last pro tip I want to give you that a lot of people aren't even aware of, and it's actually pretty cool, is if you're in a situation like this. In this situation, we have no company commander with wire crew, and then within our mortar platoon itself, you'll see there's no wire crew either. So there's no way to communicate, right? We have our commander up here. He has a gorgeous field of view. He can see the enemy approaching. We can check that by checking right here, seeing his line of sight. We can even get down on his level, and we can see, look at this. Look at that. He can see those Soviets approaching, right? However, because we don't have a wire crew, we can click on his subordinate commanders. You can see there's no wired connection. So how is he going to get orders down to these guys to be able to get them to fire on this position? Well, you have an option. Let's go ahead and select this commander. And then I'm going to hit that player-controlled observe fire. And the idea that's going to happen is I'm going to lay down some coordinates, and he's going to observe those coordinates, and he's going to write them down. Then he's going to run back to his own troops and verbally shout the commands, verbally shout those coordinates. Now, it won't be quite as accurate because he won't be able to visibly see where they're hitting, but he's going to try his best, right? And that's all we can do in this life, try our best. And the key is going to be anticipating the enemy's movement, right? Because by the time it takes him to run down that hill, the enemy's going to have advanced probably a couple hundred meters by then, maybe 100 meters at least. So I'm going to place the target right here, click and drag, and you can see it's at 0%. That bar isn't going to fill up at all, actually. We just know, we have to know, just by looking, we can visually look and see that he's able to see this firing lane right here. And we can also, again, confirm with this, he can see that firing lane. So we're just going to give him a few seconds to write those coordinates down. I think now's been long enough. I'm going to right-click down by his mortars, and we're going to hit this move command because the key thing here is he has the fast modifier on. It means he'll run. So let's have him run to this position, and once he gets within verbal communication range, he's going to relay those coordinates, and the mortars will start firing on that position. Okay, you can see our commander's getting closer. I'm going to hit that 1 key to select our mortars, ensure that gearhead is checked. It must be checked in order for them to follow commands. Still getting closer. Let's see how well lined up this is going to be. Okay, it looks like it's going to be pretty good. We might actually be a little far ahead, but let's see what happens. And they're firing. Nice, nice. Let's see where they're going to land. Pretty good right there. Now you see once he reaches his troops, it does get the 25%. However, this commander, where he's at now, behind this hill, he's never going to see where those rounds are landing. And because he's never going to see where those rounds are landing, it's never going to go above 25%. So you can see he just doesn't have the field of view for it, but he still gave him that general coordinated area. So we have all of our mortars firing at it, and 25% is definitely good enough. As you can see here, still enough to disrupt the enemy, still enough to get rounds on target. Alright guys, so that was a bit of an old school one for you today, harkening back to the Graviteam Mius days. I hope to revisit it more in the future, the very near future to be exact. I think actually my next video is going to be on off-map artillery, and then hopefully we can get into a campaign. Anyway everyone, I hope you have a wonderful day. This is Warsimmer, signing off.